Greetings to everyone who is listening to my virtual presentation. I am Valerio Caldesi Valeri. I work at the University of Kentucky in Lexington, Kentucky, the US. I am an assistant professor in the Department of Modern and Classical Languages, Literatures, and Cultures. I am excited that I'll be able to share with you today my contribution to the 2016 edition of the Future of Education Conference. My piece focuses on integrating research-based contents into a classical mythology course. Please feel free to send questions, comments, suggestions to my email address, which is vcaldesiv@uky.edu. So I would like to start by talking about the aims and scope of the paper. The paper is practical in nature. I will be sharing my experience of incorporating research-based topics in the classroom setting. While the paper concentrates on classical mythology, the general principles I'll be pointing out can be easily transferred to other disciplines, so I'm fairly confident that the piece may turn out to be useful to other colleagues who are also planning to include their own research in their courses. Why do I feel the need to include scholarly research in the undergraduate classroom, you will be asking me, I imagine. Well, in part this stems from my own belief that the dissemination of ideas is a process vital to doing research. To put it bluntly, research to me, without dissemination, is really not research. Venues for the propagation of research range from conferences attended by well-versed specialists to, let's say, public lectures given to lay audiences. The undergraduate classroom is yet another avenue, an arena to test ideas with an eye to future publication. Aside from my own personal convictions, recent scholarly work also acknowledges the natural connection between teaching and research, and I'm referring here particularly to the work of Brew, 2012. You will find the bibliographical references on the last slide of this presentation. Now let's talk briefly about my research project that focuses on the mythical figure of Minos. Minos is the king of the city of Knossos on the island of Crete, apparently a marginal character in the Homeric poem called Odyssey. I argue instead that Minos functions as an important model for the main hero of the poem, Odysseus. In a lie he tells his wife, Odysseus claims to be the grandson of Minos, famous, according to Odysseus, for entertaining conversations with the god Zeus. As the Odyssey unfolds, sure enough, the relationship between Odysseus and Zeus will in fact grow closer, a process foreshadowed by Odysseus' appropriation of Minos. Odysseus had also envisioned Minos in the underworld, delivering verdicts to the souls of the dead. At various junctures in the poem, Odysseus seems to consider resorting to justice over violence in his conflict with his wife's suitors, who have taken over his household in his absence. Therefore, Odysseus' second thoughts have likely to do with the influence that his alleged ancestor and the renowned judge Minos exerted on him. There are some challenges that crop up when trying to incorporate this kind of research into the classroom. The first set of challenges comes from the very makeup of the students in the course, in the classical mythology course. These are students with little to no background in classics who take the course in order to fulfill a general education requirement. Therefore, presenting this kind of specialistic research is a challenge in and of itself. The second set of challenges comes from the very topic. I am bringing to the forefront Minos, a peripheral character in the poem. The evidence about Minos is scattered throughout the Odyssey. And finally, I am counting on some level of sophistication on the part of the students who need to not interpret at face value the so-called Cretan lie, wherein Odysseus claims to be a descendant of Minos. Knowing the challenges I was going to face in the past, I have resorted to straightforward lecturing about Minos and his function in the poem. But quite frankly, the results of the lecture format have been disappointing. Only about 65% of students identify the correct answers when the topic of Minos was involved. This obviously led to my wanting to redesign the course and to employ a few strategies that I'll be talking about. First off, I made more of an effort to foreground the themes that are involved in the topic of Minos during my lectures. So I insisted particularly on these three aspects here on the slide, particularly the rapport of human beings with Zeus, the recourse to justice in place of bloody redress, and the centrality of secondary characters and also episodes in literature in general. I really hammered these themes because they are so important in understanding the topic of Minos. The second part of the course redesign has to do with the elimination of the lectures about Minos, which I substituted with actually an exercise that was inquiry-based, where the students had to explore and engage actively with the topic of Minos. What I have on the next few slides is a sample of readings that the students did for the class and that I went over in class during lecture, and each of these readings is actually representing a theme that's important for the topic of Minos. So we start with a report of humans with Zeus, and the story that we used in class is the story of the Titan Prometheus who steals fire from Zeus. Zeus punishes him in the guise that you see depicted on the vase painting here, an eagle continually eating at the liver of poor Prometheus. Interestingly enough, Prometheus had acted on behalf of human beings. He stole the fire from Zeus to give it to humankind. And Zeus, not content with punishing simply Prometheus, the representative of man, he also punished humankind by compelling them to work the fields in order to get produce. So again, it's a story that's important in understanding how essential a good relationship with Zeus has to be. Let's move on to the next slide, where we have the second theme, the recourse to justice in place of bloody redress. We read a play, a tragedy titled The Furies, in which Orestes, the main hero, has killed his mother, and he's being harassed by these divinities. You can see them on the vase painting here, the Furies. These are the women holding snakes in their hands, divinities who were in charge of avenging murder in a family, and they would essentially drive mad the perpetrator and lead him to his death. So Orestes flees to Athens, where he faces a trial that's held by a historical Athenian council. The council, with the help of the local goddess Athena, will determine that Orestes is to be acquitted of the murder of his mother, and therefore the whole story demonstrates how violence, as represented by the Furies, can be replaced by a more peaceful alternative, and that would be, again, recourse to justice. Let's move on to the third theme in question, the centrality of secondary characters and episodes. I had the students read a poem that focused on the ascent to power of Zeus. There's a little detail about the whole story that is seemingly unimportant, but it's essential to our understanding of the whole myth. After establishing his domain over the gods, and after having conquered all of his rivals, Zeus marries a goddess by the name of Metis. In a very disturbing turn of events, he swallows Metis whole. Metis was actually pregnant with Athena, the goddess of wisdom, and we can see on the base depiction here that Zeus, having assimilated Metis, is also able to give birth to Athena, as you can see here. So this is actually the aftermath of the story. Again, what would seem to be a little disturbing detail within the general story is actually quite important. The name Metis, in fact, means cunning intelligence. Through cunning intelligence, through deception, through trickery, previous rulers, that is, rulers prior to Zeus, were actually overthrown. So what Zeus is doing here by assimilating Metis is that he's making cunning intelligence his own prerogative, and he is not making it accessible to anyone else but himself, which ensures the stability of his rule over the gods. With the students now primed to the main themes that I wanted them to work on when tackling the topic of Minos, I reorganized, as I said before, the class, and we had actually 2 sessions as a replacement for the lectures. Each of the sessions was 35 minutes long. The large class of 150 students was divided into teams of 6 students each, and the exercise consisted in basically excerpts from the Odyssey and questions that the students were to answer in the allotted time. The purposes for these exercises were 2. I wanted to sort of enhance the student engagement with the topic of Minos in the first place, and second, I wanted the students to be able to apply the concept that we studied throughout the semesters to the new context. The next 2 slides contain an excerpt of the exercise that was assigned to the students. You see the first session focused on Odysseus, Zeus, and Minos. So we have a quote that comes straight from the Odyssey. We have very precise questions that I formulated in order for the students to actually think about the story in the terms that I really wanted them to, but also wrap up questions that left the students with absolute interpretive freedom when they were called to think about the evolving relationship between Odysseus and Zeus and the role of Minos as a model. So this next slide also has the second session with the second problem, that is Odysseus, Minos, and Justice, with exactly the same structure. So I wanted to conclude with some reflections on the course redesign here. I was extremely pleased with the results of the multiple choice test in that an average of 87% of students identified the correct answers on questions that revolved around Minos. This is a significant improvement from the 65% correct answers that I had before. I think that student success was triggered by the preparatory work that I did during lectures. I also think that the investigative nature of the exercise, along with the peer pressure that comes with teamwork, was instrumental in this process. The only possible drawback that I have in mind is a time commitment of organizing 17 minutes of class dedicated to the specific exercise, which led to a reduction of contents because I was not able to have the students read as much as I had them read in the past. But obviously, since this experiment was all about improving student success, I have no regrets. Here's a select bibliography of the works that I consulted. I wanted to thank all the viewers for their attention. Thank you.